Hello, and once again here to talk about an episode of Scooby-Doo that I love, despite the unfortunate problems that bind it. When talking about the best of the best in Scooby lore, most people will default to the original series. You really can't go wrong there. If it's me personally, I will probably go for Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. I have a lot to say about that one, and it's the best thing to ever come out of the franchise, in my opinion, but that's not today's topic. If I had to choose my favorite comfort food in the Scooby franchise going back to childhood, it would actually have to be the new Scooby-Doo movies. Airing on CBS, this was the first sequel series to the original Where Are You, starting in 1972, 2 years later. The format was changed from half-hour mysteries to hour-long specials, and every episode had a guest star. Sometimes real and not voiced by the real guest star, and sometimes just a cartoon character crossing over that Hanna-Barbera already owned at the time. We saw a recent revival of this in the most recent series, Scooby-Doo and Guess Who. That one's honestly pretty good too. The episodes of the new Scooby-Doo movies that I grew up with the most were the Batman and Harlem Globetrotter episodes due to the individual DVD releases they had. So, I definitely have a bias in loving those, but the one episode I always made sure to watch, the one that never really failed to make me happy, is the Haunted Candy Factory. And I can't be alone, because the special guest star for this episode, Cass Elliot, has several silent cameos in Mystery Incorporated. Another reason for me to love it. Though, I've also found there to be a lot of discourse around this episode I'll be covering today that I never even thought about until now. Also, I promise I'm not going to do another full episode recap this time, don't worry. As someone that grew up in the 2000s, a lot of guest stars that weren't cartoon characters or people like Dick Van Dyke and Don Knotts that I did grow up with were nothing special to me since I wasn't raised on 1970s pop culture. Their appearance in an episode would instead have to sell me entirely based on their charm alone rather than previous knowledge or novelty of who they were. Until I was much older, that was the case for Cass Elliot. I only knew her as the lovable Mama Cass from Scooby-Doo. But who was she really? By no means will I get into the depths of the interesting life of the Earth Mother of Hippiedom in this quick bit, but I can at least provide a little additional information for someone like me that might be as unfamiliar through the lens of just a Scooby watcher. Ellen Naomi Cohen, or Cass Elliot, or as she was often known, Mama Cass, was born on September 19th, 1941. After becoming a folk singer in 1963 and trying out a few other gigs, she formed her band The Mamas and the Papas in 1965 and quickly became a hit. They would stay together for 3 years until 1968, ultimately releasing 5 albums and several top 10 singles. Their official breakup came in 1971 following problems with jealousy, drug abuse, alcoholism, and Cass's constant personal weight struggles. Through these years, Cass was also married twice and had a daughter who still carries on her mother's legacy. 2 years later, she would appear in this particular episode of Scooby-Doo. Tragically, only 9 months later, Cass was found dead following a concert due to heart failure at only 32. Unfortunately, her weight in particular would lead to nasty rumors that she died from choking on a ham sandwich, which, despite being proven to be a cruel rumor, still persists at times today. Not only that, but Dan Aykroyd and Robbie Williams might also tell you that Mama Cass is still around us, haunting about her inside her former home. The disrespect she consistently faces, typically over her weight, even now decades after leaving us, is honestly disheartening, and I never realized just how much this particular episode feeds into that part of her legacy. But before that, to quote the woman herself, "How do I tell people who I am? Not being a writer. The only way is to sing songs that reflect my opinions." I might not have been exposed to her music or life during the time I fell in love with her on Scooby-Doo, but that didn't stop her infectious charm from captivating me. Her sense of comedic timing is impeccable and flows with the gang perfectly as if she was always around. That's not a quality most of the other guests had, where they would usually either show up, stand out, or be immediately forgotten. Growing up, I really wish she had been in multiple episodes like some of the other guests. Every time she's on screen, I either smile or laugh more than any other episode of the series, and she makes this a quintessential must-watch episode for me. But the episode does have a problem. It's one I never actually thought about growing up, but it's clear that it's present. The episode sees Cass Elliot in danger as the Green Globs seek to scare her away from her newly purchased candy factory. But from the first scene where she gets to interact with the gang, much of her dialogue is just self-deprecating weight jokes.
I knew I was heavy, but not that heavy. Who are you kids?
I never thought anything of this before, but the more I try to steer away from making those toxic kinds of jokes about myself, the more they start to stick out to me now.
Forget it, Fred. If I can't budge that door, nobody can.
Self-deprecating humor is a defense mechanism to make yourself the punchline before someone else can, and taking control seems like an idea that makes sense at first, but the damage it can do to you mentally, especially when it goes too far and turns into self-hatred, really does start to take a toll. Considering how Cass is treated by people even in death as people still make jokes about the ham sandwich, her self-deprecation regarding her weight and diet here stands out as a real issue.
Butterfingers.
Butter never spread like this!
Even the gang in the general episode make sure to take shots at her weight pretty much the entire episode and even work it into the plot occasionally.
If I ever get out of here, it'll be strictly grapefruit. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and in between snacks.
These days, I try when I can to not think so many things like this about myself. Less jokes about how ugly I feel I am. And to my surprise, I really don't feel so bad about myself anymore. Not taking yourself seriously and laughing at your faults is one thing, and I'm sure that's how it seemed in 1973, but knowing the issues Cass really did have about herself, I can't help but feel a little sad now whenever I hear her or the gang poke around at her. Not to mention just how terrible it is that the only running joke the entire episode is how overweight she is to begin with.
I think we've stumbled on something bigger than all of us. Well, bigger than you kids, anyway.
If she's happy to joke about her weight, okay I guess, but body shaming and joking about it is in itself a terrible problem that really needs to go away. And once you start to make these jokes about yourself often enough that you believe them, it's too far. As much as Cass seemed like someone happy with who she was, it's clear that this episode and the extended length it runs for took things too far.
Hey, you should eat more. Food gives you energy.
I wish that were all it gave me.
They really don't even bring up her singing career often enough that you would register that as what she was best known for if you were like me and didn't know. So, having said all this, you might assume that I also now hate this episode and want to call for the cancellation of Scooby-Doo. Does it feel shitty to hear Cass make a weight joke every other line? Yeah, it does. But her charisma and natural talent still comes through despite that. The episode continues to be incredibly charming, and my opinion is that I still wish Cass Elliot had a few more speaking appearances in Scooby-Doo before she left us. Just with less self-deprecation. She was a delightful person with a talent like no other, and she deserves a better legacy than what she's sometimes left with. If you didn't know much about her before, or even if you're here as a fan of hers, go listen to some of her work and really appreciate what she gave us. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, follow me on the Twitter and whatnot, leave a comment about a video you might want to see, or anything else. Maybe check out my previous video where I covered the only Scooby-Doo episode to ever give me nightmares. Bye!